Meteorologist Brian Bennett here with some important information about the storm surge that we can expect or potentially not expect from Hurricane Irma as it moves across the state of Florida. Here's a picture of New Orleans after Katrina. You'd think of Katrina, you'd think of storm surge flooding. Here's a picture of Harvey in Houston, and you think of Houston and the recent hurricane, and you think about the 52 inches of rain that flooded almost the entire metropolitan area. And water is not only damaging, it is deadly. 50% of tropical cyclone casualties are due to storm surge. That's water coming in off the ocean or a bay. 25% is due to rainfall-induced floods. So 3/4 of casualties in a hurricane are due to water. Now, we are going to have some heavy rain across the state of Florida. We're looking at the potential for perhaps 15 inches of rain, and that will cause some localized flooding and flooding damage, but not the 50 inches of rain that Houston saw, and there is a silver lining to the storm surge as well. First of all, let's focus on Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is one of the areas that is most prone to having a horrible storm surge in the event of a, say, perfect storm making landfall, let's say, in Pinellas County. If a storm were to make landfall in Pinellas County as a Cat 4 or 5 hurricane, it would have winds out of the southwest. That water would be rushed into the largest estuary in the state of Florida, that being the actual Tampa Bay itself. Also, the bathymetry, the ocean bottom is very shallow on the west coast of Florida. That also leads to a larger storm surge possibility as well. So in a major hurricane, roughly 70% of Pinellas County could go underwater. Just about all of South Tampa, including McDill, could go underwater, including Tampa General Hospital. The Tampa Airport could go underwater in a major hurricane. Same thing goes as you head down to Anna Maria Island and Longboat Key and Sarasota. Bottom line is, storm surge is something that we fear in the Tampa Bay area. It's something that could cause catastrophic damage across the Tampa Bay area. So there is a bit of a silver lining to this horrible hurricane that's going to roll across the state of Florida, and that being that we're not looking at a worst case scenario for the majority of Florida, and that has to do with the wind direction and the path of the storm. The storm is going to ride pretty much to the north over the majority of Florida. If you can see this on your screen, you can see these little arrows are pointing from east to west. That's because winds rotate counterclockwise around a hurricane. So as long as the storm is east of Tampa Bay, that means that we're looking at an easterly wind, at least on the northern part of the storm where the stronger winds will be. And that means that the wind is blowing at least offshore or perhaps blowing to the south. And that makes a crucial difference when it comes to storm surge, especially in the Tampa Bay area. Now, as the storm exits, we'll start to see winds that turn around to the west, and that will raise water levels a little bit, especially up around Cedar Key area. But by then, the stronger winds have moved to the north, and the threat has diminished some. So that is very important for the Tampa Bay area. Now, with that said, we are looking at a storm surge flooding possibility across parts of Florida. So let me show you this map here, which is called an inundation map. What this shows you is how much water will be on land that normally would not be on land. So what you see basically from Spring Hill down to Clearwater to St. Petersburg, including much of the areas surrounding Tampa Bay, Sarasota, down to Venice, you see a little bit of light blue here. And the light blue represents a possibility of about a 1-foot storm surge inundation. That means that water could come on shore about 1 foot. That means right by the very front of the ocean, right by the coast, the water is going to rise about 1 foot. And that's very minor. That is very minor considering the possibilities of what could occur in a major hurricane. So I'm not looking at a major storm surge flooding event out of this hurricane for the Tampa Bay area, and that is great news. Now, something we'll have to keep an eye on. If the storm happens to go into the Gulf of Mexico, that will change things for us. That will increase the storm surge flooding possibility. But as long as the storm is east of Tampa, then we're going to see very minimal storm surge, and that's really going to minimize the type of damage that we can see in the Tampa Bay area. Now, with that said, let's hop up here to Homestead Springs and northern Citrus County, heading up towards Cedar Key. With the storm exiting, we will see winds out of the southwest, and that could bring a bit of a storm surge. The blue is a 1 foot inundation. The yellow is a 3 foot inundation of water. So we are going to see a little bit of a storm surge flooding and some of the tidal flats and marshes of areas surrounding Yankeetown down through parts of Crystal River. So keep that in mind if you're around the Crystal River area, that there could be some storm surge flooding in your area. Again, as I mentioned, as you head south, not really a storm surge flooding issue for most of Tampa Bay unless you're in one of those extremely prone locations. In that case, please take precautions that you need to take to keep yourself safe if you're in one of those incredibly prone areas along the coast of Tampa Bay. Heading down towards Port Charlotte, the yellow here represents a storm surge of about 3 feet as you head inland from the harbor. As we head south, the storm surge possibility does get worse. Here's a look at Fort Myers. Fort Myers is looking at a bit of a storm surge threat. Again, the blue represents inundation of about 1 foot. Yellow represents inundation right around 3 foot. Orange is an inundation of 6 feet. So we're looking at a water rise of about 6 feet for immediate coastal and low-level locations in the Fort Myers location. Fort Myers Beach will likely see some storm surge flooding that could raise the water level about 1 to 3 feet across Fort Myers Beach. So if you're down in Sanibel or Fort Myers Beach, you do need to watch out for some storm surge flooding. Is it a worst case scenario? No, it could be worse if the winds again were out of the southwest, but nonetheless it is much more of an issue in Fort Myers and Cape Coral than it is going to be in the Tampa Bay area. So please pay attention to your local officials and evacuate if you are in one of the flood zones, as again we are going to see some storm surge flooding in the Fort Myers, Bonita Springs area, and even Naples area is looking at the possibility for some storm surge flooding as well. Now, the worst storm surge flooding is actually going to occur as you head down to South Florida. The red represents 9 foot storm inundation. That is water that'll be 9 feet above the ground wherever you see the red color here. So I'm a tall dude. I'm 6'4". That means I would be 3 feet underwater if I were standing in this area during the height of the storm. So a lot of storm surge flooding down in the Everglades City area and also down in southwest Florida. But fortunately, this area is relatively sparsely populated. Okay, so you're wondering, okay, that's great. We're having an easterly wind and not a major storm surge flooding event for the Tampa Bay area. But what about the onshore wind that's going to occur on the east coast of Florida? Well, we are going to see a storm surge flooding event, especially for southeast Florida, but the bathymetry is such off the shore of Miami Beach and Palm Harbor area that the water goes deep fairly quickly, and that leads to an event that is not as prone to major storm surge flooding. So fortunately for Miami Beach and areas north, we're not looking at a worst case scenario as far as storm surge flooding goes. Now head down to Homestead and areas that are east of Homestead, and we are looking at a major event here as far as storm surge flooding possibility goes. Again, the blue is 1 foot of water, yellow 3 feet of water, orange 6 feet of water, red represents 9 feet of water on the ground where it should not be in this area. So Homestead, you are looking at a major storm surge flooding event. Now as we head north, the land is laid out such that we're looking at a lesser storm surge threat, although in Sunrise Harbor, areas south of Miami, we could see a surge of 3 to perhaps 5 feet or so. So again, I'm sure many of these areas will be evacuated well ahead of the storm surge flooding event that is going to occur in southern Miami. And you don't have to be right by the water to experience storm surge flooding as well. Keep in mind that all these little waterways that go inland, well, they're connected to the Atlantic Ocean. So you push water in from the Atlantic, and it's going to be pushed in these little rivers, just like a straw, like water being sucked up a straw. Same thing with these rivers. You can have flooding 30 miles inland from a river due to storm surge flooding, and that's what's being represented here on this map, with a little bit of flooding possible right along the river going through downtown Miami. Now, as we head to the north, again, we're looking at some minor flooding possible right along the more prone areas of northern Miami and Miami shores. Heading north, storm surge flooding not really too bad as you head up towards Sunrise Key and eastern Fort Lauderdale. So some great news there that the storm surge flooding should be fairly minimal. Same thing goes for Boca Raton and Deerfield Beach. Nearly non-existent storm surge flooding. So that is great news there. Now, as you head north towards Boynton Beach, we're starting to see a little bit of color back on the map here, representing that we could start to see a little bit of storm surge flooding, especially as we head to Cape Canaveral and areas north of Cape Canaveral. So, but all the way up to Jupiter area, we are looking at pretty minor flooding, again, except for this circumstance where inland we could see some storm surge flooding due to, again, the water kind of being sucked up a straw and pushed inland by the hurricane in some of the inland locations. All right, so getting up to the Cape Canaveral area, again, the possibility of storm surge does increase. Same thing goes for this river just east of Port St. Lucie. As we head north to Fort Pierce area, we're starting to see a little bit of yellow. That represents possibility for a 3-foot storm surge in the coastal area of Fort Pierce, not Fort Pierce itself, but the coastal area. Same thing goes for the barrier island that is right along or offshore of Vero Beach area. Same thing goes as you head north as well to Sebastian Inlet and areas that are right along the shore, right along the barrier island. That's where we could see that 1 to 3 foot storm surge on the east coast. Here we are in Melbourne. Melbourne itself looks like it'll be fine from storm surge, but head out to the barrier island, and again, we could see that 1 to 3 foot inundation. Here we are heading towards Merritt Island and Cape Canaveral, and this is where we could see the flooding event perhaps be a little bit worse. You're starting to see some yellows, and that's due to, well, first of all, it being kind of a wetland type area, which is more prone to flooding, but also winds rotating out of the northeast could kind of get blocked up against the northerly facing Cape Canaveral and give us a possibility for a 3-foot storm surge or a little bit greater. Here's a look at New Smyrna Beach, and yeah, we're looking at 3-foot storm surge for the immediate coastal locations. Same thing goes for a lot of the wetlands, even far inlands, even 20 miles inland, we could see some storm surge flooding due to water being pushed up these waterways. Daytona Beach could see 3-foot storm surge flooding. Now, not the actual city area, but the immediate beach locations could see the water breach the ocean and come on shore where some of the hotels are, right along the barrier island where Daytona Beach is. And same thing goes for Flagler Beach and even up into areas north as you head towards the St. Augustine area as well. We are looking at that possibility for a 3-foot storm surge. All right, so I've pretty much covered the entire coast of Florida. Again, there are some pockets that will experience some bad storm surge. The worst area would be down in southeast Florida towards the Homestead area and also very southwest Florida. But again, that's very kind of rural location in Everglades City. Tampa Bay area, for the most part, you're actually looking okay from storm surge flooding. But again, on the east coast of Florida, as I just showed you, there are some spotty locations that will need to take precautions and evacuate from the possibility of a storm surge. All right, guys, I wanted to share that with you. Storm surge is obviously a very important part of a tropical cyclone, and it could be a worst-case scenario, or it could have been worse, I should say, for the Tampa Bay area. So a bit of a silver lining there, especially for Tampa Bay. With that mentioned, I do have to say that storm surge is probably not going to define this storm. What I think is going to define this storm will be power outages and wind damage due to the strong winds going over the state. In fact, take a look at this map. In the orange and red color here, this is a possibility that 40 to 50% of people could be without power, and that's pretty much the entire state. So 2.5 million people could be without power in Florida after Hurricane Irma moves through. The only reason these southern counties are in green is because practically nobody lives there, but they're going to see a lot of potential power outages as well. So that does include the Tampa Bay area. So if you have a generator, then get it ready to go. If you haven't gotten your flashlights ready to go, then you need to make sure that is ready to go as well. And of course, having non-perishable food, as if we lose power, we have no refrigerator. So I think this storm is going to have some areas of bad storm surge. I think we're going to have some bad areas of freshwater flooding as well. But I think this storm will be defined by the wind damage and the power outages that are going to occur across the state of Florida. All right, guys, I'm going to do a more detailed forecast based on the latest models that will be coming out here shortly. So I'll be posting that over the next 2 hours or so, and then planning on doing a Facebook Live session at about 2 p.m. to update you with any questions that you may have. But that is the latest on the storm surge threat across the state of Florida.